Howdy folks, hope you've all had a good weekend, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. I'm not really sure what to talk about this week. I've no idea how long this episode's going to be. I'm going to have to fire up some PC gaming news websites and see what's been going on. Although I do have this overwhelming feeling that I've forgotten something really, really important. Not like something to talk about in Mingles with Jingles important. I mean like doing your taxes important. Oh yeah, I haven't done my taxes. No, I hadn't forgotten to do my taxes. I just don't want to do them, so I'm delaying it for as long as possible. But I'm sure there was something else. Oh, it'll come to me. Probably too late. We shall see. So anyway, what's been going on this week? Oh yeah, that was something I saw in the news. It's not exactly PC related. Do you remember, it wasn't even that long ago, it was maybe only even a year ago. I mean, that's just how quickly AI has come along in the last year. It's terrifying. When people were submitting AI-generated art to art competitions and winning and getting disqualified when they got found out that their stuff wasn't, well, I don't want to say real, but you know what I mean. You know, that they'd inputted a bunch of keywords into an AI and the AI had spat out the artwork and they'd submitted that to the contest. Well, apparently, and it's astonishing how quickly this stuff's developed over the space of just a year. But there's this thing called the 1839 Colour Photography Contest. It's named after the year that photography was first widely available to the public, 1839. And they have an AI category, which seems a bit weird. You know, the fact that photography contests now have AI prize categories. Because if it's generated by an AI, it's not a photograph, is it? Well, I suppose they don't really have any choice anymore, because if they don't have specific AI categories in photography and art competitions, people are just going to submit AI-generated stuff anyway, so they may as well keep all the AI-generated stuff in its own category to give real artists a chance. Anyway, and in that AI category, a photographer by the names of Miles Astray submitted, I think he called it Flamingon, which was a flamingo bending its neck behind its head underneath its body, and it won the People's Vote Award and a bronze prize, and this is in the AI category. So, you know, he won prizes, and then told everybody, actually, this is a real photo, and instantly got disqualified. So we've come full circle. And he didn't care about being disqualified, he did it for a reason, to prove that nature can still beat the machine and there is still merit in real work from real creators. This is what he told some photography website called Petapixel. After seeing recent instances of AI-generated imagery beating actual photos in competitions, I started thinking about turning the story and its implications around by submitting a real photo into an AI competition. Which, you know, is fair enough. But just stop and think about that for a second. An actual real photograph was submitted into the AI-generated section of the photography competition, and it won a prize. This means that the AI stuff is so photorealistic that the judges couldn't tell the difference between an AI-generated image and an actual photograph. I mean, AI-generated images do still have issues. They have problems with fingers, apparently. There are certain things, if you know what you're looking for, it's not easy to tell the difference, but there are certain things, if you know what you're looking for, that you can spot that will give away that what you're looking at is AI generated rather than something done by a real person, unless the real person is deliberately doing something, trying to make it look like it. Oh no, this is all getting too complicated. But you get the idea. The thing is, I mean, the AI has come along so much just in the last year, it's only a matter of time, and probably not a very long matter of time, before it becomes impossible to tell the difference. One of the things that, for me at least, is a bit of a giveaway, does anybody have an Instagram account? Because you can go to bed at night and I'm either swiping through reels on Instagram or I'm browsing YouTube videos, and you've got all of these Instagram influencers. And when I say Instagram influencers, I'm specifically talking, in this case, about, you know, the sort of thing I'm on about. Some young lady flashing her boobs, pretending that the whole point of the reel is that we're supposed to care about the comment that she's making when... And I'm not criticising it, okay, you know, if men weren't swiping on these things, they wouldn't exist. But some of them are AI now. Because AI, it's not just images, now it can do video. The implications are terrifying. Because I was talking in last week's episode of Mingles with Jingles about the way technology can just render entire industries obsolete overnight. And the specific thing that I was talking about last week was the video rental industry, which basically doesn't exist anymore thanks to streaming, mostly due to Netflix, which led the way. And that entire video rental industry only existed for about 20 years. An entire industry that sprang up with the rise of home video cassette recorders and died in the space of 20 years with the rise of the internet and video streaming. Gone. The thing is, that's what technology does. You know, it replaces existing technology with something new and better. The thing is, it's the pace of change in the last 50 years or so that's getting out of control. If you look back at the Industrial Revolution, things like the textile industry, cotton, weaving, spinning, that sort of thing. People had been weaving cloth for 1,000 years until the mid-1800s, when suddenly steam-powered machines could do it not necessarily better, but certainly cheaper and in larger quantities. And as far as the mill owners were concerned, that was good enough. So practically overnight, hundreds of thousands of cloth weavers were out of jobs. Incidentally, that's where the word sabotage comes from, because they didn't go down quietly. So sabotage, to destroy or disrupt, it comes from the Industrial Revolution. In England we call them Luddites, and that term still hangs around today as a word used to describe somebody who can't get used to new technologies. But in France, what happened was the same thing that happened in England. The workers would sabotage the new machinery that was putting them out of jobs by taking their wooden shoes. The French word for that was a sabot, or sabot, I'm not entirely sure how it's pronounced, which incidentally, yes, if you're thinking armour-piercing, thin-stabilised, discarding sabot tank ammunition, that's where that word comes from as well, because the actual armour-piercing bit in that ammunition, the penetrator, like the bore of the tank gun barrel is 120mm across, but the penetrator is only about, 10mm across. So in order to ensure that propellant in the charge doesn't get wasted, the penetrator is enclosed in a sabot, or a shoe, that falls away once it leaves the barrel. So that's basically where it comes from, the French word for a wooden shoe, which they would use to throw into the running machinery that was putting them out of jobs, hence the word sabotage. But that entire weaving industry had been around for 1,000 years and then gone. Well, not exactly gone. I mean, you can still get a handmade shirt or a handmade suit rather than one made by a machine. It's just going to cost you an awful lot more. It's like when MP3s and music downloads started happening. Everybody thought, well, that's it for vinyl records, and it kind of was, but you can still get vinyl records. They're just not a mass market thing. The vast majority of people no longer get their music on a vinyl record or a magnetic tape. Now it's all MP3s and music downloads. You know, the industry doesn't go away, it just becomes a lot more niche and usually also a lot more expensive. The thing is, though, it's the pace of change in the last 50 years that's starting to get out of control. I mean, remember, it took about 1,000 years for weaving cloth by hand to no longer be a thing, unless you were prepared to pay extortionate amounts of money to have your clothes woven by hand. It only took 20 years for video streaming to completely destroy the home videotape market. It's only been about a year or so, I can't remember exactly, I could probably look it up, but hey, so could you, when AI image generation tools like Midjourney appeared. It was only about a year ago, maybe a year and a half. And now things have gotten so advanced that not only do we have artists taking real photographs and using them to win prizes in the AI category of photography contests just to prove a point, because even though, you know, people kind of know what to look out for now with AI art, this is why we now have AI art categories in these kind of contests. But they've become so advanced that even trained judges can't even spot the difference anymore. And now they're able to do video. And again, you know, it's kind of, you can tell. I mean, if you're looking at Instagram at some of these influencers, the AI influencers, they look too perfect. But it's only a matter of months before you aren't going to be able to tell the difference anymore. I mean, do you remember when deepfakes first came out? I mean, they were pretty impressive. But in order to hide the fact that what you were looking at wasn't actually Keanu Reeves foiling a robbery in a convenience store, for example, I'm referring here to the one that Corridor Digital did on YouTube, which was very, very good, but they had to fudge things in a few certain ways in order to hide the fact that it was a deepfake and not actually Keanu Reeves in this convenience store. So it wasn't, super high quality 4K resolution or anything. It was cell phone quality, so that the blurry edges wouldn't look quite as obvious and things like that. But it still looked pretty good, and it did fool quite a few people. And then, of course, there was when they had Luke Skywalker. I'm sorry, but this is not a spoiler. This is years old now. When they did a deepfake Luke Skywalker in the final episode of, I think, the second season of the Mandalorian. Yeah, the second season of the Mandalorian. And it was really good, but again, you could tell there was a bit of the uncanny valley going on there. You knew that it wasn't actually a 30-year-old Mark Hamill. First and foremost, obviously, by the simple fact that Mark Hamill he hasn't been 30 for a very long time. But it still looked way, way better than the earlier deepfake stuff from a year ago with, for example, Keanu Reeves, not actually Keanu Reeves foiling a robbery in a convenience store. But then, a year later, in the very next season of The Mandalorian, they had the deepfake Mark Hamill back, and it looked amazing. I mean, you couldn't even tell the difference anymore. That's just how quickly the technology had moved on in the space of 1 year. So what you can do now, and you've been able to do this for quite some time now, and as always, it takes YouTube forever to catch up, and their response is typically half-assed, but for quite some time now, you have been able to, for example, let's use Donald Trump, because he's been in the news a bit lately. You can easily, using tools that are commonly available to everybody, right? It doesn't require high-end CGI. It doesn't require a major special effects house from Hollywood. Anybody can create and upload a video of Donald Trump confessing to any number of crimes and put it on YouTube. And anybody watching it would not be able to tell that it wasn't actually him. And obviously this sort of thing is already happening and has been for some time. Just go onto your browser of choice and do a search for political deepfakes, and you will be horrified at the sort of thing that's been circulating on social media, not just YouTube, but Instagram, Twitter, or whatever they're calling it this week. You just don't know what to believe or who to trust anymore. In fact, these days, if you upload a video to YouTube, and this was a change that YouTube made, because I did talk just a while ago about YouTube's response being late and crap, but these days, for about the last month, if you upload a video to YouTube, you now have to state whether or not you've used any kind of deepfake or AI to simulate a real living person in the video. This is, of course, YouTube just trying to cover its ass for when it inevitably gets sued over something that somebody uploaded that was AI generated that cast somebody famous in a very, very poor light, because it's going to happen. And YouTube's going to lose even more advertisers over it, and as usual, it won't be YouTube who ends up paying for it. It'll be the likes of me. Where's it going to end? Well, it probably won't end. It'll probably take the lawmakers 20 or 30 years to catch up and actually change the laws in order to take account of all of the things that it is now possible to do. And, maybe I'm giving them too much credit. Maybe 20 or 30 years is a bit generous. I mean, they still haven't updated the copyright laws from the 1950s to take into account the stuff that's available with social media these days. But what about people working in actual visual effects? And not just movie studios and CGI houses, but computer game developers as well. Because Electronic Arts is already talking about replacing a lot of their workforce with AI. Are we looking at another industry? A very young industry that's already about to go the way of the home video cassette rental market? Because, CGI, you could argue movies like Tron, movies like The Last Starfighter, but I'd say that the CGI industry as we know it today really only kind of got started in, was it 92 or 93 with the release of Jurassic Park? Because that was supposed to be stop-motion animated dinosaurs all throughout. There was a legendary stop-motion artist called Phil Tippett. And this is probably a good example, actually. Phil Tippett's probably a very good example, because This was a guy who had done stop motion. I mean, back in the 50s and 60s, it was Ray Harryhausen. If you ever watched old science fiction and fantasy movies like Jason and the Argonauts and stuff like that, all of the stop motion monsters and skeletons and stuff, they were all hand animated by Ray Harryhausen. And in the 80s and the early 90s, there was a guy called Phil Tippett who was the king of stop motion animation. You ever watch The Empire Strikes Back, second Star Wars movie, Battle of Hoth? All of those all-terrain armored transport walkers, they were all stop motion animated by Phil Tippett. I mean, if you needed any stop motion done in the 80s, in Hollywood, Phil Tippett was the man that you wanted to get, because he was just the best that there was. And he was hired along with Stan Winston. I really don't have to explain who the guy who did The Terminator and the Alien Queen, anyway, Stan Winston. Phil Tippett and Stan Winston were hired to do a combination of stop motion and animatronic dinosaurs for Jurassic Park. There was never intended to be fully CGI dinosaurs in that movie. There was some CGI supposed to be in the movie, but it was there to smooth out if you ever watch stop motion animated anything, there's no motion blur. You can tell you're looking at something that's stop motion animated. And the state of computer graphics at the time was thought to be just sophisticated enough that they could use it to introduce an element of motion blur and make the stop motion look completely realistic. And that's basically what ILM was supposed to be doing, not rendering fully CGI dinosaurs. But there was this one, and I can't remember his name, but there was this one computer artist working for ILM who was supposed to be just adding motion blur to Phil Tippett's animations, who thought, we can do this. We can do this whole thing. But he was told categorically, no, this is your job. Just add motion blur to the stuff that Phil Tippett's doing. But he went behind his boss's back and he rendered a Tyrannosaurus Rex, just going through a walking animation. And then one day they were given a presentation to Steven Spielberg. And just next to the stage, this guy just so happened to have a computer showing this render. As Steven Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy, who produced the movie, came in. And Spielberg saw this and said, hang on a minute, what's that? And this guy's boss was furious. But, I mean, what can you do at that point? You either look like an idiot or you back him up. And Spielberg had no idea. Nobody had any idea that you could actually do that with computers, and it changed the course of movie history. It certainly changed the course of Jurassic Park. And so we ended up with a combination. I mean, Stan Winston was fine. They still used the animatronics for all the close-ups and stuff. But what did that mean for Phil Tippett? Because there were no longer any stop-motion animated dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. And this is why I'm using him as an example, because CGI basically, you'd think, put him out of a job. Except it didn't, because he's still credited as an animator on that movie, and he still went on to work on other movies. He just didn't do stop-motion animation anymore. Because he had this skill set. He knew how things moved. From years and years and years of animating things moving, frame by frame, he had this thorough understanding of skeletal structure and movement in a way that really nobody else did, which meant that his expertise was still needed in order to make the CGI look real, because he understood how things moved in a realistic way. He might not have known how to build a 3D model, although he soon educated himself in how to do that, or how to apply textures to that 3D model, but that's just the start of creating something on a computer and animating it and having it look real. There's so much more to it, and he had that expertise. So he still ended up working on a whole bunch of other movies as an animator. He just wasn't as a stop-motion animator anymore. So it's possible that, I guarantee that this new technology coming out is going to make a whole bunch of people unemployed, in the same way that the Industrial Revolution cost a whole bunch of artisans their jobs. But I don't necessarily think it's going to be the overnight end of the computer graphics industry, whether that be in movies or in games. I think it's going to be an evolution rather than a revolution. People are going to have to adapt. Because one way or another, nothing's going to be the same again. And on that bombshell, I think that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope I've given you all something to think about and something to discuss in the comments, and I look forward to seeing what you have to say. In the meantime, as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.